said it, so I didn't do it this time, and that's totally okay.
That's awesome, and I'm glad it worked out because I don't know if I'm on the screen right now, but I'm glad it worked out. I just got the Kessel Chat Twitter announcement that says we are live.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Fantastic. Right on. Oh, sorry. I was trying to open up the restream chat so I can actually have chat stuff on the screen while people are here. But it's awesome, dude. I'm glad we're back. We were here last week, and I had a little bit of a medical thing, but everything is fine. Everything is good. There's no problems. We're back this time, and we have got so much to talk about because we've got the latest episode of The Mandalorian, of course, and there's just so much to talk about. I know you've got a hot take. Also, we've got the season finales, the 2-part season finale of The Bad Batch, season 2, and that was, I don't know if you've watched it yet, but wow, that hit some feels. That hit some serious feels. So, let's start with and just get into it. I want to hear, you said right in the pre-show, you said that you have a hot take for The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Let's get into that. Let's just start there.
Okay, I want to establish my credibility before I say what I'm going to say. I like Star Wars. I am a big fan. I am a fan of this show. I like the show. I love the characters. I like everything that Disney is doing. I think its most successful production so far has been Andor. Easily. Like as much as I love this first season of The Mandalorian, its most successful show to me is Andor. Like I'm on, if they didn't do another season of Andor, I would be okay. I'd be sad, but I'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
It's because it was so good of a story. I guess they are only going to do one more season of Andor.
Okay.
And that's fine too. I'm okay with that. I think that The Mandalorian, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. The Mandalorian show is almost like a microcosm of the rest of Star Wars as a property. And what I mean is that it's almost like a rock that's dropped into the lake now. You know, mm-hmm. Like the first season, we were just following the single Mandalorian. And of course, great show. And we talked about this in the last episode, in the last season. And it follows, like I said, the Dollars trilogy. The first movie is all about the single person. The second movie in the Dollars trilogy, for a few dollars more, is about the Colonel and Clint Eastwood. And then in the third movie, it's 3 characters, all intertwined. Mm-hmm. And that end up in a standoff in the end, all guns at each other. And maybe that's going to be Bo-Katan, the Armorer, and the Mandalorian. That's my assumption at this point. I have a feeling that that's where it could go, with maybe Grogu in the middle. But I think the Mandalorian needs to decide what story they're telling. In the same way that Star Wars, this is my hot take, it can't be, the Mandalorian, for it to continue to be successful, cannot be a platform that keeps introducing so many different, it's almost like Game of Thronesian at this point. It's like, I feel like we're over in, we're going to the Martells. Now we're spending time with the Tyrells. Now we're at the Wall. Now we're at the Winterfell. Now we're now we're in Essos. Now we're back. It's too grand of a universe that's introducing too many things at once. As much as I enjoyed seeing all of this in this last episode, personally for me, and Jeff, you can tell me I'm wrong, but I now am at a point where I'm like, you got to start different shows now. And I know that's what their goal is, and that's what they're trying to spin. But it's they're trying to introduce these things so they could possibly spin off other things. It's at the expense, though, of the narrative of this show. We're taking too many side quests away from our main narrative, and and that's that's I love it. I love this, but I'm now at a point where I'm like, it's got to stop. We're running out of episodes. Reminds me almost of Book of Boba Fett.
Let me ask you a question. Okay, let me ask you a question. What do you think? In your view, what is the main narrative of the Mandalorian?
So this is actually you're getting to a thing that I think is the issue, is that in this season, I I think there's a goal and then there's a narrative, right? In season one, the narrative was identity, who a person is and what they are. Like confusing, um, confusing loyalty to a dogma versus believing in yourself, right? That's like season one, because he ultimately has to renege on having delivered Grogu, and then that has consequences, and then the second season is really around how one grows to let other things go. This is great. This season feels more goal driven than story driven. The goal seems more like we want to introduce a wider world, and that's great. But it's at the expense of the story, because I think this narrative is there's more. There's this wider world, and there's this bigger Mandalorian group, and these are a people that need to now find a home. But it's becoming too big of a story. Like there's too many protagonists, I don't know if this is, because really this season of The Mandalorian to me, Jeff, feels like Bo-Katan story. It's a Bo-Katan story now more than anybody else's.
Okay, interesting. Okay, it's an interesting take. I actually see it very differently. No, I shouldn't say it. I do see it differently. I do feel differently than you do about this. I'll caveat it though with, in whichever episode it was, last couple of episodes where we've been getting this, like you said, the side quest of the Doctor and the cloning and all of that. Like,
that could have been its own show. I loved it, and I don't want to interrupt you because you were so respectful to me. But I want to say I'm not saying that I don't like the show. I love it.
I know that. Oh, I know. I totally get it. Yeah.
I just want to throw that out there. Like, there's a caveat. Like, I really totally do like the show. This is just a thing that I feel.
Yes, I totally agree. Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I'm with you that these little bits of side quests that are basically alluding to Moff Gideon is not actually gone and telling us about that. Cool. I'm with you that those feel very disconnected from what I think is much more of the crux of the show. And the way that I was talking to somebody at the comic book shop earlier today when I stopped by to get my pull list, because I was lazy to get that on Wednesday. When I stopped by to get it, we were talking about this, and it dawned on me that this season of The Mandalorian, to me, is feeling like we are evolving from the Mandalorian, big air quotes, is not Din Djarin. The Mandalorian is a way, and we are getting introduced to the Mandalorian. What is Mandalorian? We are getting reintroduced to what Mandalorians are and who they are and all of that, which is, I kind of get to the same place as you, but I'm thinking about it from a different perspective, which is, I love that. What I don't care for so much, like you said, is some of the side questy things are really interesting stuff and maybe could even be like their own 2 or 3 episodes that are like, just to build up some antagonism or whatever it is that they could put on YouTube or whatever. They're fantastic. But I know that there's a connection because they're talking about Moff Gideon. So clearly there's a connection back to the Mandalorian. But it also doesn't feel like it should be there. It feels like it should be someplace else. But back to my love of it, what gets me so excited in the way that for me, what I feel like is a lot very similar to what you're feeling. But what I'm really loving is in these most recent episodes where Bo-Katan's coming in with Din, it's not that, to me at least, it's less of Din. It's what I'm noticing is it's more of, we are seeing almost I hate to oversimplify this, but almost a very long game redemption arc for the Mandalorian culture. And the way I kind of explain this, I wanted to do a side video about this. I did a couple videos on TikTok kind of about this. The way that I'm seeing it is tens of thousands of years before, the Mandalorians were like their entire culture centers around combat or war, but not in an antagonistic way. It's not like they fight each other because they hate each other. Fighting is just it's a core part of what their culture is all about. Battle, dominance, these things, but again, not because they hate people or they're fighting other people because I want to dominate you and take you over. It's just this is just part of their culture. But for so long, and we saw it in the Clone Wars and other properties, the Mandalorians have been torn apart. They, we even got to a place, obviously, in the Clone Wars where we had these binary, these poles fighting each other. Death Watch and this radical, side of the party that wanted to be go back to the battles and go back to the wars. We dominate everybody, which is actually very disingenuous because that's not really what the Mandalorian people were. But they like take what they were and then add anger, basically make them Sith, essentially. Like almost like that's almost what Death Watch was doing without the Force. And then you had the complete polar opposite with Duchess Satine wanting to be totally pacifist and like go literally the complete opposite direction. And it's unfortunately that big pendulum swing. It's like it never works. Like you can't just swing completely to one side because the only other option generally at that point is somebody's going to want to swing you totally the other direction. And somewhere in the middle is where you're going to have to end up being. It's not a perfect middle, but it's some squishy, abstract, nebulous thing in the center that you end up in. And what I'm loving about this season in particular, and I said this to someone earlier today, this has become my favorite season of The Mandalorian because I'm really enjoying the world building, the additional world building, and take the little side questy stuff out. I mean, the world building that we're getting of Mandalorians, who they are, what they are. Like seeing Navarro is almost the redemption of Navarro and how it's changed is like almost like this is like a microcosm of what we've seen in Star Wars just in general with the one planet redeemed and they're coming around and now they want to do this other thing. And I'm really, really loving that because, yes, Bo-Katan has been featured more prominently, but what I really loved about it is the fact that the armorer doesn't take her helmet off. Spoilers, everybody, by the way. The fact that the armor...
Sorry about that. We're gonna get into spoilers with the first. How many episodes are we in now? Like 5, 6.
I love when they come in and the two of them walk up at the end of the episode, and Bo-Katan has her helmet off because the armorer told her to take it off. And someone says I'm restreaming to the DevNet channel also. Well, that's not good. Should not be doing that. Let me see if I can fix that. Thank you for telling me that. I thought that I had disconnected, but apparently I did not. Let me see if I can stop that. Thank you, whoever just told me that. And let me fix that real quick. Okay, turning that off. Okay. Cool. That should be fixed now. Thank you for letting me know. That's awkward. I did not intend to do that. Hopefully that is fixed now. Please, everyone, double check me just in case. Sorry for the confusion.
That's funny. So just as a heads up, everybody, on a side note about our team is that we actually are we work obviously with DevNet. And Jeff's on the DevNet team, and so we thanks for the heads up on that because we obviously do a lot of content creation outside of Star Wars. Although, if you happen to be watching us because you were also interested in networking, we are more than happy to talk about the types of networking technologies that are featured in Star Wars. Because oh my gosh, if the thing that I have like this season is the amount of technology items that are available, and and as Jeff, you're working this out and kind of checking this out. If I could just talk a little bit.
It's funny.
Cool.
It's funny. Sean. Somebody at work who leads one of our community teams messaged me saying, "Hey, you're streaming the DevNet channel." I didn't see it till just now, but I'm like, okay, it should be done. Everyone, double check me. It should be turned off now. Okay, so back to the thought that I was having. I'll try to shorten it up a little because I was kind of going on a tangent. What I like about that scene when the two of them walk out in the armor, she does not show deference to Bo-Katan. What I liked about that scene, and it was subtle, is that the armor is still very clearly the sort of, I wouldn't call her a spiritual leader of this covert, more of the spiritual guide for this covert more than anything else, because she
Mhm.
doesn't try to take on the mantle of leader. Clearly she's trying to avoid that, although she does run the kind of, she's kind of like the tribe's shaman, so to speak. That's how she appears. But I liked how she brought out, when she brought out Bo-Katan, I liked how she said Bo-Katan lives in both worlds, and she is going to do something, she's going to help us, but in a different way. And I liked that because it really does show the independence of a Mandalorian can do their own thing, but still connects things together. I actually really am, I'm enjoying that this is becoming much more than just Din. It's becoming more about all of these Mandalorians and what is going to become of Mandalorians going forward. But I'm with you that some of the side questy stuff that we've been getting, with the exception of the Grogu one,
Oh yeah, like
and
I
that
love
like
seeing that.
that
Like, but
stays.
that's a payoff to a character that's on
Yes,
the show. Like that's
exactly.
the thing that I'm fine with. I
The
and
other
I'm
stuff
right
was
with
just,
you.
it was just a little too. I mean, the other stuff I think is really nicely connected to what's happening in the Bad Batch.
Ah,
That was
yes.
fantastic. That's fantastic, but it felt strange having it in this show.
What I feel like is happening, and I could be wrong, but this is just, and again, this is just my feeling, is that uh the the writers of this show are involved in all the other, like, Dave Filoni properties, everything else that's going on. And they're trying to build this interconnected universe because they have the airtime to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a thing that they did on Boba Fett. Like, oh, hey, like, let's start tying some of these properties together. Like, let's make sure we show Luke Skywalker and an Ahsoka on the planet with Grogu. Let's show the season 2.5 of The Mandalorian. So much so that they had to go out and actually text people, or I'm sorry, on Twitter say, by the way, if you had only been watching The Mandalorian, you actually now have to go back and watch Boba Fett because you won't know that Grogu is back with Din Djarin. You know
Right.
what I mean? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what I mean by I oddly, in the attempt to build the world out bigger and interconnect their stories,
Mm-hmm.
my view of this, and it's just my thought, is that they've made the world smaller. And this is a massive universe. A thing that I loved about The Mandalorian was how big everything was. Like, they're going to this place, they're going to that place, Spotchka, like all of this stuff. Like, they built their own universe. But by making it so interconnected, it starts to make the universe small again. And what you're talking about with The Mandalorian and the redemption arc for the culture, I think that works really well, but it can't be this and all these other things.
Right. Oh, totally agree
I
with you on
think
that. Yeah.
it needs to just be that, and then as seen through The Mandalorian, as seen through like it's Jon Snow and the Wildlings,
Yeah.
Wildlings. It's Tyrion Lannister and everything that's happening in King's Landing.
Yes.
Like that's where you've got to have your touchstone base character, and that's what I mean by, it's like, by moving the center off of that, we're losing that narrative. And in my opinion, it's like, if it's a matter of oh, well, we want to introduce all these concepts, so we start all these other shows, that's great, but it's hurting The Mandalorian, in my opinion. You're chewing up time that I want to spend with these other characters.
You know what? Now that you say it this way, yes, I agree with you. And one of the things that I agree, one of the things I specifically agree on is that, and it just dawned on me, is there has been so much chatter on TikTok and on YouTube, on various other channels about, oh, well, this thing that happened to Mandalorian is clearly teasing that Thrawn is going to come back. They were chased off of Kalevala because they were chased off by all these fighters, and clearly that means that there's other ships. Okay, yes, of course, there's an Imperial ship someplace that had to, because TIE fighters don't have hyperdrives. Okay, cool. So they,
Yep.
Something else in your mind. Well, that clearly means it's Thrawn, and he's building up his entire army to come back, and he's going to be, I'm like, whoa. And in my mind, I'm like, whoa. slow down. Like, slow
Yeah.
down. Like, none of that just means that. And I'm like, and but what you just said brings up a really good point, that these things that they have chosen to do have introduced or have opened doors to allow people to think, well, this type of stuff must be happening. That must be what all this is. When in reality, those fighters are much more likely to be Moff Gideon's, because that's what they've been teasing. Because Moff Gideon, he escaped. He's not in that shuttle that they thought. Blah blah blah. They teased the Beskar piece in there, and so many people are out there. Beskar, that must mean it's got to be the Mandalorians. What do they do? I'm like, or it's the dark. What are they called? The Dark Troopers? Like, they were made from Beskar alloy. Like, that's what they're
totally
teasing. Like, that's literally what they're teasing. The Dark Troopers broke into that, got Moff Gideon out, and now he's back with his group and he's building up his army. But the problem is, like, I see that, but the problem is exactly what you said. Is it's opening the door to all these other things that people now are thinking is going to happen, which really muddles the story.
Yeah,
it really does, and it's not really what the story is all about. I don't like that. I don't need this to be a connector to the Ahsoka show. They will have They will have connections, but I don't need it to be the thing that gets you into that show.
Like, remember when we were talking in the last episode, and I was like, I didn't mind the little vignette that we had on Coruscant. I actually enjoyed that quite a bit. I really liked all that storyline. But in this storyline, that is just like, if you want to introduce other characters that are in an interrelated story, the best example of that is Andor, where you have Andor dealing with Andor stuff. You have Luthien dealing with Luthien things. Yes. You have Mon Mothma dealing with Mothma things, but they're all rising to the same inflection. They're all coming to the same intersection. Mm-hmm. And one is and Luthien is the thread between all those things. This feels a little bit different. It feels almost like, oh, hey, by the by, like, we're super interested in introducing this. We're super interested in doing that. We can't wait to tie this back to the Ahsoka story. By the way, we might be doing something more with Boba Fett, so we're going to do that over here. When in reality, my favorite parts of this season have been the moments that we've had with Din Djarin, Grogu, the Armorer, and Bo-Katan. Mm-hmm. And just giving them those moments of kind of like earned moments, you know, like that whole sequence that was beautifully shot with you were referencing, you have walked between both worlds. You can take off your helmet. You know what I mean? It's like, it's that is great. But all of this other randomness it's just like, it's like, I can't keep up with it. I'm like, what is going on? Yeah. Like, why are we over here now? And it's with great actors doing great roles. It's like, just go and just give them that show. And if there wasn't enough story with the Mandalorians to do 10 episodes, then maybe you don't do 10 episodes. You know, but exactly. Like, that's the other thing. Tell as much story as you have. That's a thing that painfully the Picard show finally figured out. And that's my only reference to that, Jeff, I promise.
No, it's not. Don't promise things you can't keep, dude.
I will. I swear. I won't talk anymore. Season 3 of Picard is finally worth it, guys. But this is a thing that I feel more like it doesn't fit. Andor, 3 stories interacting, all fit together.
Yes.
All fit together.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I really hope that they can kind of put aside some of this other it's not that the cloning stuff is not interesting. But yeah, I want the cloning stuff to be its own thing. I almost want that to be actually, thinking out loud a little bit, you know, with the season finale of the Bad Batch having just happened, and Mount Tantiss, everyone, hopefully anybody who's read Heir to the Empire, that trilogy, you're familiar with Mount Tantiss and the cloning pods that Palpatine had, and there's a whole cloning arc that Palpatine went through in that original Timothy Zahn series. And they pulled in a lot of that, not just for season 2 of The Mandalorian at the end, and the Dark Troopers and all the things that they're doing, and the cloning scientists and all that, but they brought that scientist back, and that scientist has been even featured, I think, in the Bad Batch, and at the end of the Bad Batch, it's all about this cloning thing for the Emperor or whatever else. I'd actually be really okay with some of what happened in the Bad Batch, sort of leading into kind of connecting to this cloning thing happening in its own show or something going on there. But I'm with you. I'm not seeing it with the Mandalorian. I just not seeing it. Just doesn't feel like the two things go together. Like unless
Yeah.
maybe it does, I just can't see how, because it feels like it's distracting from the threat of Moff Gideon and whatever he's trying to actually do.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, and it doesn't mean that I didn't like all these things that have been dropped in. Like, I loved the I see there's an item here from Mike about Mount with Tantis, or I loved that. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh, I loved that. I liked it so much. I paused that part of the show. My wife wasn't watching the show at the time. I was like, you gotta see this. It's so cool. Such a cool idea, and
it really
it
is.
was visually represented so well, and it's been a part of the lore for so long,
Yeah.
and actually used, I think, on another planet, if I'm right, like originally in the comics, like a long time ago, and just I think adapted very recently within the last few years just for Coruscant. That's a really Star Warsian moment. Like, I loved that. Seeing Zeb, by the way,
Oh,
good on them for bringing the
that was
voice
awesome.
actor.
I
Yeah,
that was
and how well that was realized. Dude looked like he was right there. Like,
they
the
did
special
a
effects for that,
phenomenal job with that. Oh, that was such
amazing.
that was it was and it wasn't even like they tried to make it's not like they tried to make it hidden in an Easter egg or subtle like they've done in Rogue One with the chopper, going by and
Yep.
hearing the announcement. Like, he's just there. He's just there.
Yeah.
They don't have to say his name. And it made sense. Like
Yeah.
yes, it is fan service, 100%. And also it made sense in the story. Like,
Yeah.
you can that felt like something that would be a real part of the timeline. It wasn't like, because obviously the Ghost crew is doing their own thing now. They all kind of went off and did their own thing. So clearly, like, it makes sense that he would be part of the New Republic doing something there. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is believable. I like it. It didn't feel forced. It was like, oh, it's Seb. All right, on, okay, and that was it. It just moved on. And I'm like, fantastic.
But but this is where I think, like, and this is a thing that I think Disney needs to rein in, is that I understood why that cameo was there, because the Ahsoka show, and we're slowly getting introduced to characters from Rebels to get the Ahsoka show ready, and I don't mind that, but it's too much of a deviation. It's forced into the story.
Agreed.
Not that cameo. That cameo, the
No,
way
but
you
what,
just described
what
it,
was going on
the
overall?
cameo overall was forced into the story. The cameo was fine, and I loved exactly how that was done. And that's the way you got to do those things.
Yeah, you know what? Now that I think about it,
Go ahead.
it's in that whole like thing that was happening. I forget, Captain Tiva, I think was his name. I forget that. So that whole thing about, I think Moff Gideon is back, blah blah blah. Okay, cool, that's fine. My problem with it is he's talking about it like there's something that we all should be aware of, that Moff Gideon escaped and something's happening, but all we see happening is pirates that has no clear or apparent connection. It feels like, yeah, I get you, but there's been no threat that has been implied anywhere else in this season, other than a couple hints in the last couple of episodes, and then somehow we're supposed to believe that, like, some TIE fighters over one planet and a pirate here means all of a sudden that, well, that clearly means there's a bigger threat in Moff Gideon. It's something he's very clearly distraught about, all of this stuff going on, but we haven't seen anything that he's supposed to be distraught about, except for, like, one thing. And it's like, I want to believe you, but there's been no implicit threat that's been a through line where you're the character now being brought up to show that threat is coming true. We've had it from one other episode, and then you talk about it, and that's it. So I don't know how it makes it feel like in the story. I don't know how the threat that you're referring to is supposed to resonate with me, because you haven't told me about it. Like, you haven't given
That's
me
right.
any. You haven't given, as you would say, it's been unearned. Like, you haven't earned it on camera. So why am I supposed to believe you?
You're absolutely right. And it's like, by the way, like, Thrawn comes into this. That's awesome. The fact, though, that we're talking about it because it's like, oh yeah, we're dropping all these hints, it reminds me too much of the mystery box stuff. And it's like,
yes,
no, you know what was great? In the first season of The Mandalorian, I thought that the bad guy was going to be Werner Herzog, because Werner Herzog is great. By the way, if anybody wants to enjoy themselves, go back and watch that episode where they bring in Grogu and he's like, "Would you like a libation to celebrate the end of our shared narrative?" I mean, it's like that guy. That's not in the script. That's Werner Herzog. That guy is nuts. Um, he's spoilers. His character is no more by the midpoint, and or I'm sorry, by like the with the shootout in the bar.
Yeah.
And what's great about that is when Giancarlo Esposito shows up as Moff Gideon, he's just there now. And he is a character that he is establishing you should be afraid of me. And all of that is earned. When he says the night of 1,000 tears or what, you know what I mean? It's like all of that stuff. Like everybody in that room suddenly is like, this guy is really dangerous. Oh my gosh, he's really dangerous. And then he's showing you how dangerous he is. It's told and then it's shown. And it's like Thrawn being dangerous is one of these things that it's like, were you a really big Rebels fan? Because then this is going to pay off for you. And this is one of these things where I think that Disney's getting ahead of itself. It can't wait to do this reveal that it has all but gone ta-da months ago. It needs to be more earned than this, and it needs to be discovered by the characters on the show. An example of that is versus the X-Wing fighters talking about this and all this stuff. Do you know who I would have preferred figured this out?
Who?
Bill Burr.
Yeah.
See what I mean? That character is an earned character on the show. Yeah. And let's say he's out there in the world, maybe dealing with these pirates, maybe dealing with former Imperials. He's out there. That is an earned character that's connected to this show, well connected to this show. Not just a cameo, not just a guy that's like shows up in an X-Wing and shoots people down, but rather an earned character that we've seen go through a redemption arc, and really a closing arc of that would be having been a former Imperial, having hated Operation Cinder, having hated all these things, that character is the one that discovers it and is on a race to relay that back Infinity Gem style, Adam Warlock style, trying to get back to Earth to tell people that there's this threat that's out there. And that would have been the thread. You introduced that in episode 1. That would have been the thread to follow. That's underpinning all of these other stories. So that way it's not so like, we're over here, we're over there, we're over here.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. It's, yeah, I think we've kind of run the gamut of the Mandalorian. No, I mean, I think you hit it. I do want to talk a bit about, so a couple of things. One, I want to talk a bit about the Bad Batch and some of the things. Some of the things that happened in the season finale, a 2-part season finale. I guess you could call the season finale really just the last episode, but I think it was intended to be a two-part thing because it was definitely a cliffhanger. I saw a video earlier and I wanted to run this idea by you because I just want to get your take on it, and because I heard it and it really, I was like, I hadn't noticed that, but wow, this has been this is really true. I think it's really true. So, spoiler alert, of course, in the finale, we lose Tech. Something is going on. Tech is hanging. There's no way to get him up without crashing the entire cart and everybody dies. And so Tech says, execute Plan 99, which, if we go way back to the Clone Wars, it was for one of, Clone Force 99, but it really refers to one of the clones sacrificing themselves for everybody else. And what was interesting is, one, I think that was a really beautiful way to handle the character of Tech and the characters with this, because they've sort of lost Crosshair. Or they have lost Crosshair, at least for the time being. They've lost Echo because, Echo is fighting kind of a different fight, so to speak. He's not dead, but he's decided on a different set of priorities for a little while. And now we lose Tech. And what's interesting is I was watching a video earlier, and the person said, if you think about it, this entire season, has been kind of setting Tech up to run the sacrifice play for his people. So like in one of the episodes, he breaks his femur, but he still hobbles off and chases after to go save Omega. In another one with a race, he kind of gets hurt and he still takes it on and goes and gets something done for the greater good. And it's been sort of setting up this person who is hyper focused on Tech and hyper focused on the things in front of him. Sometimes it feels like he almost doesn't read the room because he doesn't get social cues, whatever else. That's what people sort of assert about him.
Mhm.
And I like that in this season, or this particular season, they've been setting him up as somebody who does actually get it and who does understand, does understand what friendship actually is, and that they're more than just a group. They are actually friends and they love each other, and that he runs his sacrifice play by, you know what it reminded me of is the scene in is it called The Day After Tomorrow with Dennis Quaid and Jake Gyllenhaal back in the day, where big ice storm happens and almost everybody dies. And there's a scene where Dennis Quaid and there's three of them coming, like hiking across to New York, and it's covered in snow, and they walk over some glass and one of his buddies fall and he's on a rope and hanging there, and he's like, if you keep holding on, you're all going to crash through. And the buddy cuts the rope and falls and dies, and then the other two are left behind. It was basically a recreation of that scene. Like, if you don't do this, we're all going to die. So I'm going to do this because, come on now, like, that's ridiculous. Why would we do that? And I really appreciate it, but I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on how they've treated that character and how it plays into the story overall.
It's earned. Also, and I might be tipping my hand on where I think a series like this ultimately has to go. But the Bad Batch as a group are they're out of time. And what I mean is that they're now relics of a time that's passed.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens to relics, Obi-Wan style, is that you have to fade away.
Mm-hmm.
And either you change into a new thing, or you pass on. And this was something that's earned as far as like a character-driven moment that is, I am going to sacrifice myself for the others because it's not for a mission, it's for you.
Yes.
It's for you to survive. And that is the story that I think, and I could be projecting maybe my own emotions onto this. That is the story that they're trying to tell, is that these, for all of this time in Star Wars, the canon, for so long, clone troopers and stormtroopers are basically put out there as just nameless, faceless individuals. TK421. Now you're getting this earned, like, no, they sacrificed so much for one another, and that is a earned story. I hate to say this because there's no happy ending for this group.
No.
This is a Dirty Dozen story. This is a Rogue One story. This doesn't have a happy ending. And so I love that they're doing that, because there isn't going to be they're going to all buy a house together and they're going to live on a farm and everything's going to be great. That's not going to be the case. They're not going to find, they will find maybe hope and purpose as individuals, which again breaks the concept of they're all one thing, as individuals living separate lives with separate purposes, or in this way, which is sacrificing themselves for the others. There is no happy story for them. These are their happy endings, and as much as we are saddened by it, these are in fact their happy endings. Tech gets to die as he lived.
I like that I like that the way you say that this is their happy endings. Because I think too often as humans, as people, we think of the phrase happy ending as the end was happy in a traditional sense. Everything is unicorns and rainbows. But that doesn't have to, that phrase doesn't mean that. It's not that simple. That phrase is basically, how does you choose to have your story complete the way that you get to fully control it, and Tech sacrificing himself for the others, he got to choose to do that. Like, yes, he was put in a tough position, but they could have kept trying, and they would have, because their group does that, and he got to
Yeah.
choose. As you said, he gets to end his story as his story was written, which is,
Yeah.
it kind of needed to end this way, because I think if they try to make the Bad Batch have a place to go that does give them all a happy ending, like that one episode where it kind of felt like they're just here and things are good, I almost felt like that could be a season finale, but that would be a terrible season finale, because
Exactly.
that's not the Bad Batch. That's not who they are.
That's
They
not.
can't simply just give up on these things. It's just not who they are. It's literally not in their actual makeup. They were not made for these purposes. They're made to do what they do, and they all know that. And it's not that they've accepted it; they've embraced it. Like, we're good with this. We play to our strengths by continuing to do this, not just walking away from all of it. It was almost sort of the final gong sound when what's her name, that the character came up and kind of, it was flirting with Tech right before they got on the ship to go do that. That was kind of like the moment where, as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, something's clearly going downhill for this group at this point.
And then that's a classic story element that you always have to have in. You have to show someone what they could lose in their death. What have they lost?
Yes.
And that is the normal life, but that was already lost.
Yep.
That was already lost. And so yeah, there's a comment in here by Mike about, hey, or I'm sorry, there was another comment. I'm sorry, it was I agree with Mike's comment. There's another comment, and it flashed up so I couldn't see who it was, but it was about the no body is shown. And I always think, though, if you kill someone, and again, this is another Star Trek reference, Spock's death is earned. And as much as I enjoy seeing Spock and everything, and it's very science fiction to bring Spock back, that is an earned death. And I when a character dies, it's great when they stay dead.
Yes,
like when it's earned, when it's an earned death, and you can Obi-Wan people from time to time, but when it's an earned death, let that story conclude. It's like this whole, like, people are dying to have Robert Downey Jr. come back as Iron Man. No, he's dead. Like, that character, but we can bring him back multiverse style.
Of course you can.
No, you can't. There's always,
just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Doesn't mean you should.
It cheapens.
It takes it away.
Yeah, it cheapens the act that that character chose to perform to end their story. You cheapen that and you make it not meaningful. You know what? And I apologize to anybody if this is going to offend anybody. Sorry, that's not an apology. I literally mean this. I don't intend, what I'm about to say, I do not intend to offend anybody. I just want to say that out loud. But I can't stand soap operas, that type of TV show. I think I hate them. And if you bring someone like Tech back, to me, that feels like a soap opera. Because you can just do whatever you want whenever you want to, and they do. And someone dies, and they bring them back, and then they die. Then they end up in Turkish prison, and they come back in 20 years later because the cast member wanted to go off and do a new project. Like, no, stop. Like, this character chose to end his story at that point. It needs to end, and it makes it even more impactful knowing that he is actually gone, to have that creepy doctor toss his Tech's goggles to Hunter at that moment. It reinforces it. He doesn't have to say anything more than that. He doesn't have to rub it in anymore. He can say, "Here it is. Thought you might want to have those." And then when Hunter puts his gun down and picks those things up, and it's a reminder for Hunter of, like, yeah, this is the world we actually live in. We don't live in a good world. Like, the Empire's taken over. Like, if these things come back, if these people come back, it's like, yeah, but they can still fight the Empire. It's like, that almost reduces the entire sacrifice of what the rebellion is going to do later on. You need to let this happen to reinforce how bad the Empire is, so that there is actually a struggle that makes sense. You do too many of these, like you said, Obi-Wan things, where you just bring them back. You start to reduce the need for a rebellion later. It's like, yeah, but they all came back. So yeah, but why would you rebel? Like, it's like,
Chewbacca's not really dead. We just need 20 more minutes, and then we're gonna find him again. That's where, and you mess with your audience, and that's the last thing that you want to do. you want, like, it's funny because in comic books and in science fiction, people die and come back all the time. Professor Xavier in the X-Men dies 600 times, I think. And even when Wolverine died, I remember there was a website, is Wolverine still dead? And you could go and check in, and it was like, yeah, Wolverine's still dead. And then when he came back, we all knew he was going to come back. And that's why it's like those deaths are always so hard. But I'll use the Spock example again. Spock's death is so great in Star Trek 2 that it is diminished. I feel bad for a generation of people that grow up knowing that Spock's not going to die. He's coming back in the next episode, in the next movie. And it's like that death scene is so earned. I just saw this comment about Star Wars is a soap opera. Yeah, it is. And it is one of these things where it's like, I understand what Jeff you're saying, which is you have to stay true to things. If it would be like, guess what, everybody, Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, they're actually fine. And it's like, no, they're dead. You know who stays dead in the comic books? Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben dies in Spider-Man, and I mean, there's memories and stuff that come back with Uncle Ben, but I could be wrong. I might have missed some amazing Spider-Man or superior Spider-Man that went out that I didn't see. But Uncle Ben stays dead, and that's because of the effect it has on Peter Parker. If you kill these characters and it's an earned death, leave them dead, because that the reason why it hurts is because it mattered.
Yes.
And then if you take that away, you're also taking away, like, oh yeah, so and so can come back and this person can come back. Jonathan Kent in the Superman comics. Wow, that is a great reference, because Jonathan Kent dying. If anybody wants to see the use of an earned death, it's Jonathan Kent dying in All-Star Superman. And check out All-Star Superman. It's a great comic book. It's probably my favorite Superman comic book. And that death of Jonathan Kent is earned. And likewise, like if like Krypton has its survivors and whatnot, but yeah, you keep bringing it back. Then it's like, well, then why is Superman here? Like, if all of Krypton's back and Jor-El and Laura are back, then it's like, well, then what is it? It's to your point. Make your stories matter, even if it's hard. Even if it's hard to take sometimes.
Yeah.
Stuart Little doesn't find Margot at the end, and guess what? The kids are fine. Spoilers for Stuart Little. Kids, adults, everybody, we all deal with loss and things that are what I think you might call irreparable. And that's life. Some things aren't repairable. And it's great when you see that in fiction, because it's a part of our lives right now. And that's my soapbox moment, Jeff. Sorry.
I love it. And I'm Star Wars and Beyond put a couple comments in that I really appreciate. And I appreciate the disagreeing with me about the soap opera stuff. That's totally fine. That's totally fine. This comment, though, I have up on the screen about it ruins the emotional impact potentially, same as Kanan. I really, really appreciate that you said that, because yes, that is another really great moment where not only does Kanan sacrifice himself, gets his vision back at the very end, sacrifices himself, and then basically, we all know it, he comes back as a Loth Wolf to help the group. But he doesn't come back as just himself as a Loth Wolf. He's coming back and helping as a Loth Wolf, as a manifestation of the Force, helping in a very particular way. And at the end, when him and Ezra share, the Loth Wolf and Ezra share an eye connection moment, and then the Loth Wolf walks off into the distance. Yes, I agree that is a keystone moment for Ezra Bridger as a character. That changes. Ezra was already being changed by this point in the Star Wars Rebels series. That moment with losing Kanan, but then more importantly with the Loth Wolf basically helping him see something that he couldn't see before, now that his master is gone, and recognizing that that's what the relationship there was. That is a keystone moment for that character, and will forever have changed the character going forward. And Star Wars and Beyond, just to your point, it's not all of Star Wars that in soap opera idea that I dislike. It's the casual throwing away of characters to death and then bringing them back and then throwing them away and then bringing them back in soap operas that traditionally I don't care for, because it makes those things almost meaningless. So in these stories, keeping those keystone moments that have such an impact on a character, they need to be respected, because like you said, sometimes things are not repairable. Sometimes they need to have that impact on you as a story to be meaningful. The meaning comes from what that story just did to you. And sometimes it's not a positive feeling, but that's what was necessary, because that's what the story was all about. And I think that needs to be respected as much as the happy times that reinforce the good stuff. We also need this too, because that's what makes, that's why stories are there to teach us something. They're not just there for entertainment. They're there to teach us something, because entertainment's great, but if a story's not teaching you something, it's almost useless as a story. It's supposed to be there to teach you a thing. But yeah,
or at least engage with you, like engage with your characters, make characters you care about.
Yes.
And in storylines that you then care about. By the way, like Star Wars definitely has its like soap opera elements.
Oh,
secret dad, secret twins, you're a Palpatine. if Palpatine,
tune in next week as we find out.
No, totally. And if this is my only, I don't know anything about soap operas, but I know one character. If Palpatine is not the Stefano of the Star Wars universe, you know what I mean? But
so my mom watched soap operas like crazy when I was a kid. My mom, I can't use that word that way. My mom watched soap operas a lot when I was a kid, but she watched like General Hospital and All My Children. Those were hers. She didn't watch Days of Our Lives and the others. And I know this because every day that I would walk home from school, I'd walk in, my mom would be ironing or doing something else in the house, and a soap opera would be on.
Something was on.
General Hospital was her ride or die. And there was a character, I remember this because this was like a long running thing that my mom would talk about. There was a character called like Frisco, I think was his name. And he was married to he had been married to this woman, but by the time I was old enough to even recognize what these things were doing, he had been gone. Like she was divorced. She had started dating other people. He had been long gone. Nobody knew where he was. And then one day, like he started peeking around a corner. You just see his face show up, and he had apparently been out of the country doing something and got arrested and was put in a Turkish prison. In the past 10 years, he's been in a Turkish prison, and now he's back, and then he's gone again, and then he's back again. And I'm like, okay, like you almost had me interested as a kid in this guy. He was gone, stuck in a prison, looks like a homeless dude. He comes back and he's gonna get cleaned up and save the day with his wife. And okay, maybe there's a thing here. But no, it became almost meaningless because you did it 2 or 3 more times to the same character and to other characters. Like, you almost reincorporated back into society almost immediately. There was no trauma involved. He's just kind of back, and the story continues. And then one day he's just not there anymore. You're like, okay, if you can do this at any time and there's no impact anything, then this is almost meaningless. None of this makes sense.
And what you're talking about, and this is I think the difference between kind of casual surface level stories and the deep stories that we're asking for is. Right. Soap operas are built for you to be able to drop in and out at any time.
Right. Yes.
And what we're hoping for is Star Wars doesn't get that way. We want Star Wars to always be driving meaning. And that's meaning with its characters. And of course, that definitely means that when you kill someone off, they stay dead.
I will say, to add on to that, or to interject in that, to me, it doesn't mean, however, that somebody at any point in Star Wars as content is being created and put out there can't drop in and pick up from that moment and run forward. Absolutely, you can. Everybody should have a place in whether it's the medium is, a comic book or a print book or the animated or TV or whatever it is. You should be able to drop in at any moment and start enjoying it. To your point,
enjoying it, but it's more like they shouldn't be so surface level that it's like
not
nothing matters. Nothing matters. All this stuff is like it's all going to be this way one week and it's going to be another way another week.
Yeah, it's not transactional like in the way that a soap opera is transactional, where it's like whatever, like you said, whatever happens this week could be completely undone and retconned next week, and it doesn't make any difference because that's not what these are here for. That's what I don't want Star Wars to get like. I don't want the meaning to go away.
Totally. We are going to start a new show called Soap Opera Chat.
We will.
And we're going to talk about our memories, because I will also talk about my memories watching my grandmother watch the soap operas. And, and by the way, like, no hate on soap operas. I seriously grew up with people in my family watching them all the time. And so, and some of my favorite actors came out of soap operas in the 80s. Like, oh my gosh, so if that wasn't like the minor leagues for acting. And then you work your way up from like soap operas, Highway to Heaven, and then boom, you're on Star Trek: The Next Generation. Third
Highway to
reference of the day.
Heaven. Oh my god.
So yeah. Well,
we
hey,
did miss Little House
Jeff,
on the Prairie there someplace.
I know that we're at time.
We are. Yes.
And so I think in our next one we're gonna try to do another review of the next episode of The Mandalorian. Yes. So tune in again if you're interested in kind of hearing our readout on that next episode. And then, yeah, we're going to keep monitoring Star Wars all the way up through these new shows that are going to come out.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate all the comments and the dialogue. It's been super awesome to have everybody here. Just love seeing. I love when the conversation's actually happening in the live chat that way, because you all add a lot of value and you bring up things that we're not necessarily thinking about, and it creates this really cool conversation. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks everybody.
All right. Have a good one. We'll see y'all soon. Bye.
Bye all.